Okay, so in the next photograph, let me just look at this. Okay, so it's a photo of you holding up a poster. So you're standing with it's like I don't know what's the name of those hats. It's like a summer hat.
It's a Panama hat.
Yeah, okay, Panama hat. You've got what looks like a frangipani stuck inside the rim or something. You're
Right.
wearing another polo shirt. It's got a bunch of shark graphics on them, like a hammerhead or whatever.
It's a sign for the bull shark diving in Playa del Carmen.
Okay, so it says Tiburon, Toro, Bull, Shark, and it's got all of these like. I mean, you're holding up it's like an A3 sized piece of paper, and was this your sign or just a sign that you found?
No, it's a sign that was given to us by the people working with shark conservation in shark diving in Playa del Carmen. This picture was taken in it was 2016, I think, in Cancun, when the Convention on Biological Diversity met there.
Okay.
And we were organizing a side event, a session on sharks, whales, and marine conservation.
Okay.
To talk about non-extractive uses of marine wildlife.
Yeah.
Because I've been around these international conservation treaties for a long time, probably around 30 something years. And one thing that really bothers me is that there is very little representation of the people that profit from leaving nature alone, from doing non-extractive uses of wildlife, both marine and terrestrial. Whale watching operators, divers, ecotourism guides, bird watchers. None of these people is really well represented at international treaty meetings that deal with conservation and define global policy.
Right.
So we started going there as divers for sharks and annoying people around because, these international treaties are little cliques where people establish their territories. They don't really like interlopers to come and start with strange new ideas like protecting wildlife gives you more profit than anything else. CBD is on the right track on that. But we wanted to bring the marine component to it, so we got this side event, and we invited the local shark conservation people in.
Okay.
And lo and behold, the shark dive operators are the ones who fund most of the conservation work in Playa del Carmen.
Right.
Bull sharks used to be killed in huge numbers there. People from the ordinary tourism industry were afraid of them.
Sure.
And then there was a whole work being done of raising awareness, hiring fishermen to help protect them and do shark research. So we brought the bull shark diving into the CBD as an example of what you can do when you protect and restore marine wildlife and use it in a non-extractive way. It generates jobs and income, which is much needed in coastal communities around developing countries.
Sure. Jose, I have to say something, through the podcast, I get to meet, well, basically whoever I want to talk to. so, I get to speak to artists and there are four main themes, right? One of the themes is creativity, creative expression. One of the themes is conservation. One of the themes is something called service leadership. And one of the themes is strong women. You're not exactly a strong woman, but with all due respect,
not really. Yep.
With all due respect, but conservation.
My wife is though.
Okay, of course, but conservation, like for me, we're talking shop about going out into the field, going to these conferences, and sure enough, as you say, these meetings are okay. How do we maximize profitability? By harvesting these animals, like that's really the mentality of like, and then it's completely, it's shockingly, extractive and destructive. And so this idea of having this, like you show up and creating a conversation that really just says, okay, hold on. Did you know maybe you should do this instead and make more money or whatever? And it's amazing. I think I love it. I totally love it.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it's really important. Whale watching was a very important force to get most countries to adhere to a ban on global whaling,
Mm-hmm.
especially around Latin America, where you had Japan coming around and buying votes from all different developing countries.
Mm-hmm.
When you started showing people back in the 90s that they could make more money for their communities by protecting whales instead of killing them.
Yeah.
And then you started to bring different constituencies to the table. You
Right.
know, when you talk about how nature protection can generate jobs and income for specific communities, these communities become part of the political trust for conservation.
Right.
And that's what we've done with coastal communities for whale watching. That's what's being done with shark diving around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to do that further in all these different treaties.
Right.
For instance, you have CITES, the Convention on
Yeah.
International Trade in Endangered Species of Fauna and Flora, which is there to promote trade.
Yep.
Hell no, it should be promoting conservation of all these
Sure.
different species. And there's a specific topic in CITES about livelihoods, which usually refer to the livelihoods of people harvesting and killing animals
Yep.
or extracting plants. We need to interject there the livelihoods and the cost benefit of not killing these animals and extracting these plants, and instead using them sustainably by non-extractive means.
Yeah.
That's what we've been trying to do over time. It is slowly working,
Okay.
I'm happy to say, but we need more voices. We
Okay.
need more professionals from the ecotourism field to be present at these meetings, and then national delegations must include them. Not
Yep.
only include the whalers or the hunters, but also bring about the voice of these people that live from protecting nature.
Yeah. 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 Basically to have a full, well-rounded conversation as opposed to have a few voices for sure.
Yep.
So talk to me about this photo again. Let's just go back to it because I don't know if you're in a conference center, but it looks like you're almost in a
Yes.
lounge area of an airport. It's got that brightness and whatever. So when that photograph was taken, like, what was that day like? Like, what was that feeling on your face? Because there you have a nice warm smile. Like, you're looking extremely pleased.
Yes.
So yeah, that brings us back to that moment.
Right. I was just out of our side event, which was called Sharks, Sparks, and Whales: The Importance of Non-Extractive Use of
Mm-hmm.
Marine Wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty well attended. There was people from all over the world. The company which did media services for the Convention on Biological Diversity decided to broadcast it
Okay.
live.
Oh, nice.
So it had a really, really good impact. So I was happy because every time, I mean, it's an uphill climb,
Right. Of course.
conservation,
Of course.
and you have to push this mastodon up the hill
Yeah.
and try and make sure it works. So that day I had the impression that it was working.
Nice.
The frangipani flower was a gift from my friends from Micronesia.
Okay.
Besides going diving in Yap, I've been around different Pacific islands trying to help on different conservation works. You know, they have a SPREP, the South Pacific Environment Program,
Mm-hmm.
where a friend of mine was the species conservation director, and I tried to be present at different meetings and help their agenda forward. So yeah, it's always satisfying. It comes up as a smile when
Sure.
when your conservation efforts paid up.
Yeah, of course. So, okay, so tell me, let's bring you back to when you were a kid, right? So when you said when you were 15, you started getting around conservation, right?
Yep.
Now, somebody who's listening to this, so for example, in my case, when I decided to kind of do something very active for shark conservation, it was, the end of or the middle of the financial crisis in 2009. And I was like, well, I'm not making a living, so I might as well do something that, I don't know, that brings me another kind of reward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, I'm always doing little entrepreneurial things anyways. So, but in your case, why don't you share, like, what did your journey look like that sort of landed you as this committed marine conservationist?
Oh, well, that's a pretty long story.
Dude, it's a podcast. We're talking.
You're right. Well, I came from a pretty traditional family in southern Brazil, in Porto Alegre. My father was a bank worker and climbed up different steps to become a bank chairman. And I was always curious about different nature. And I started watching on TV one of our local conservation activist leaders, José Lutzenberger, who ended up being a very, very important national leader on conservation issues. Mind you, it was 78. Brazil was still under military dictatorship. So he was one of the very few outspoken leaders trying to get the message across. And it so happened that he was a colleague of my father at the local Rotary Club.
Oh,
so when I started showing a real interest on things that this guy was saying on TV, my father said, I know this guy, I can introduce you.
Oh, that's nice.
So he introduced me. We talked on the phone. Landlines. There were no cell phones at the time.
Yeah.
And then he invited me over to one of their weekly meetings of the local state association for the protection of the natural environment, AGAPAN.
Okay.
Which was every Monday evening. And I went there. My father took me there. And I listened to his boisterous talk about local issues and things we should be doing and stuff. And as I was sitting there was this other old guy going around with pieces of paper and leaflets and things, distributing materials. And he stopped in front of me and he pointed the finger at me and cursed me. He said, this young man's going to work with the whales, and handed me a petition against whaling in Brazil and started talking to me about that.
Wait a second.
Well,
wait.
that guy was called Augusto Carneiro. He was the guy who energized the audiences while José Lutzenberger spoke by going around, getting their phone numbers and making sure these people got into the pipeline of conservation. We've been friends since that until his death in 2014. We founded an institute with his name, Augusto Carneiro Institute. And from there on, it was kind of a snowball. I got interested in whaling and whale conservation. And after that, in 1979, I met one of the other few voices against whaling in Brazil, who was the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, Admiral Ibsen Câmara. And I went to the national capital to meet him. It was a surprise that he would agree to meet me with the agenda he has in his work, but we also became friends. In 1981, he became the chair of the National Conservation Foundation and wrote me a letter saying, we have this black whale appearing around southern Brazil. By that time, I had a group of volunteers doing wildlife anti-poaching enforcement near the border of Uruguay and things. And he said, well, why don't you go to this coastal area and start looking for these whales? I have $1,000 for 2 years of research. So we started going around. I was in my first year of the biology course in university.
Okay.
And then we started going around and found these whales in 1982. And after that, I never went back to school. I did 3 university courses, biology, veterinary, and law, and never finished any of this.
Oh, wow.
I became a professional gardener for the rest of my life.
Right. Hey,
and from there on, it was just a snowball down the hill.
I have to ask this though. So we heard about the shark moment. So my wife and I did this thing with Biosphere Expeditions. I don't know if you've heard of them. Essentially,
yes.
You have, yeah. So you pay to participate in a field study. And so collecting data, you don't need a PhD to collect data, like water temperature, like water just kind of observations of what whales and dolphins or whatever are doing. And so for 2 weeks, we went on these things, and it was in the Azores. So we looked at, all these different whales, and we had some magical moments being out at sea and just having this insane, in the ocean, not at sea, out in the ocean, and having these really just incredible experiences. So you've been on the water a lot. And so how about you give me one story of a magical moment, and then follow it up with one story of like, holy shit, I shit my pants moment.
Oh, well, there are many magical moments underwater and above the water. Perhaps the most impressive moments with the ocean I had was when I was doing whale research training in Patagonia.
Oh, wow.
In 1984, the International Whaling Commission met in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I was fortunate to meet Dr. Roger Payne, who was the father of modern whale research, non-lethal research. He discovered that humpback whales sang, and that you could identify whales by their natural markings, all that.
Right.
And he was running a whale research program in Patagonia since the early 70s. So I went there in 85 to do my research training with him. And I think that the most magical moment was when we were camping on a pebble beach in the peninsula of Valdez, where these right whales concentrate there. And I was walking down the beach, and it was high tide, and a whale just came by and started kind of walking with me, because they can hear you walking.
Oh, wow.
As you walk in the pebble beach, you make noises, and it was just kind of walking around. It was curious, and it walked around with me for about 10 minutes down the beach.
Amazing.
And it was at a full moon, and it was really, really quite something. It was just me and my then girlfriend, mother of my daughters. And it was really, really quite magical. A moment when I almost shat my pants. Let me think about it.
When you say it, it's almost a beautiful thing.
I think it was. I think it was when I first went to Palau with my wife.
Wow.
We got into a liveaboard cruise, which was really, really cheap, and we soon discovered that the reason it was cheap because it was the start of typhoon season.
Oh.
Okay. And the first day we were supposed to go diving, we got from this. It was a big ship which is no longer in service. It used to be a communications ship for a Japanese fishing fleet, and it was now a liveaboard. And you got down in the small speedboats, and then we took a 30-minute ride to Blue Corner, which is, of course, the world famous dive site of Palau with all this shark action thing. Well, and the weather was really getting worse. So when we reached Blue Corner, there was this huge wave breaking over the reefs.
Oh, wow.
I mean, huge. It was the size of your ordinary home wall.
Wow.
And then it was the first time that I was really scared in all diving operations and crap. And I was lucky enough that everyone decided not to dive that day. And
sure.
So we went back to the ship, and the ship ran for dear life to get into a channel in the middle of the islands to escape the typhoon, which of course passed by, and nothing else happens. A couple of days we resumed diving.
Wow.
But looking at that wave and thinking that I could be underwater in there, no, I don't like that kind of stuff. I'm a transparent water, warm, no current kind of person for diving.
Got it. Full on. So, hey, when you're telling me the story about the whale, there are certain moments, so when we were in the Azores, just because you speaking reminded me of this, right? And also what you were talking about, the sharks who are looking at you. And hopefully in sharing this, somebody who's listening to this might get a bit of access to that magic. So in our case, we're on this catamaran in the middle of the Atlantic. We looked left and right. You can't see any land at all. We were so far away from the islands. And at one point, a massive pod of what called common dolphins,
Right.
We're just kind of going across, and then there were these adolescents, like these small adolescent dolphins playing in the wake or the bow of the water. And at one point, I'm sitting there making photographs, and this one dolphin comes over, and in the water, the boat is tipping up and down, very gently because we had slowed down or stopped. And the dolphin comes up, and it didn't come out of the water. It stayed under the surface, but maybe like 5 centimeters below the surface itself. And it turned over on the side, and we were just looking at each other. It was clearly, it had this like sentient observation where I was looking at this animal and it was looking at me for a good like 10 seconds. Like it was looking at me trying to figure me out.
And then you realize there's a mind there.
Of course. Yeah. And that's something I wish there was a pill or a device that you could just give it to somebody and say, look, eat this and you'll understand. And then all of a sudden,
it is pretty amazing. I mean, you can see that in whales.
Yeah, for sure.
We had these opportunities here with humpback whales, especially around the Brolhos, which is still their main breeding ground in the southwestern Atlantic, and also in Peninsula Valdez, which to me is the best whale watching place in the universe because you have this big gulf which is surrounded by high walls, and then 400 or 500 right whales just going about the Gulf, and then you get out from this little village, Puerto Piramides, with a company called Pequesos Avistages. This family has been doing whale watching for 50 years.
Okay.
I know Peque, he's still there, but it's his granddaughter running the office now. His son is the captain. It's fantastic. And you go out for 3 minutes and the whales surround your boat.
Yeah.
And they're very, very curious. They don't let you go. They just put their eyes out and look at you and rub the boat.
Yeah.
And just like the gray whales do in Baja California and Mexico.
Sure.
And that's why I'm such a campaigner for human wildlife interactions.
Yep.
Those things are life changing.
Yep.
And they create ambassadors for conservation. And although I understand the need for regulations, and making sure that people do not have an impact on wildlife as they're watching them, we have to find ways of providing these encounters, providing these interactions, so people can see that there are other minds on the planet that deserve protection and respect.
Yeah. Man, you said protection and respect, and for me, that's a cue to go to the next photograph. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.